Now, there are two main groups of hip flexors. You have one, which are iliopsoas. We call them one-joint hip flexors. Then we have a second one, which is your rectus femoris, which is part of your quadricep muscles, and it is a two-joint hip flexor. Now, there are two separate ways to stretch these muscles because one of the muscles, your rectus femoris, crosses the knee, where the other one doesn't, and it's important to hit both. Oftentimes, people only stretch one, forgetting the other. Some people only stretch the rectus femoris. Some people only stretch the iliopsoas. You want to stretch both. So the first one I'm going to show you is a pretty standard one that people like to do. It's called a half-kneeling hip flexor stretch. This one is hitting the rectus femoris. We're going to be in this half-kneeling position. There's a lot of cues that we're going to go through here to make sure that you're feeling it actually in your hip flexor, you're not feeling it in your back, and you're actually feeling it. A lot of people get into the stretch and they're all like this, and like, I don't feel a thing. Well, probably because you're not doing it right. So follow along as we go through this. Again, for this stretch, you're going to primarily feel it maybe in the front of the thigh or maybe a little bit up in the hip flexor. Again, this muscle runs from the knee all the way up. It's a little band into here, so you can feel it anywhere along that region depending on where it's stiffest. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure our hip is straight ahead. A lot of times people cheat and this leg is all the way out here. What that does is it externally rotates our hip, which actually puts that muscle on a little bit of slack. So you're going to keep it straight here. Okay. Next, you're going to make sure that you have a tail. If you had a tail, you're going to pretend like you're tucking it between your legs, pulling it this way. What that does is it posteriorly pelvic tilts us. Again, putting a little bit more stretch on our hip flexor. After this, I have pretty stiff rectus femoris. I already feel a good stretch through that. If you don't, your next step is you're going to squeeze your right glute. Okay, stand up nice and tall. If you already feel it then, good. If not, then you're going to slowly, keeping everything on, lean forward, and that should increase the stretch even more. If you need to increase it even more than that, you can lean to the opposite direction. So I'm going to lean to the left to stretch my right side, and you should be getting a really good stretch all the way from me through the bottom of my knee, all the way through the top. Okay? And again, you could work going in and out of it. You could work different motions, different planes, but you have to make sure that you do all those steps prior to really feel it here. And again, this is for your rectus femoris muscle. To stretch your iliopsoas, all you're going to do is you're going to do the exact same thing in a standing position. What we do in a standing position is now that my knee is extended, we put that rectus femoris, the other muscle we just stretched on the ground, on slack, and now we can really focus all the attention on our iliopsoas, which is a little bit higher up. You're going to feel this one directly in the hip rather than a little bit down here as well. Same thing, make sure the foot's pointing straight ahead. You're not cheating by having it pointing out towards you guys at the camera. Okay, stand up nice and tall. Pretending I'm having a tail, I'm going to tuck it between my legs, posteriorly pelvic tilt, squeeze my butt. Right away, I'm stiff, I already feel it. You can lean forward a little bit more if you want, and you can lean to the opposite side to really increase that stretch right in the front of the hip. Okay. Now, a lot of times, like I said, compensations, people are just going to bend backwards. This is not a hip flexor stretch. This is me just going into low back extension. There's a big difference between locking out your pelvis, posteriorly tilting. If you imagine what I'm doing here, then basically thrusting, posteriorly pelvic tilting. You have to keep that position as you lean forward. If you lose it and you lean forward, you're going to look like this, and you're going to say, oh, I don't feel anything, because you're actually not stretching anything. So again, lock down that pelvis and then lean forward.